It's simple. We risk losing the consent of the British people. That's why we have to do things differently.
With climate change, the idea that you can stop the power of the sun or volcanoes is simply ludicrous.
That's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
If unprecedented changes are not made and made soon, there will be irreversible damage to the planet.
Zero Carbon
East. Hello and welcome to Zero Carbon Easter Series 5, Just Stop the Tories. I'm Ian Collins and this is your number one environment-based go-to podcast. That is official. If it's green, it is in. 2 weeks away. Well, in fact, it's not even 2 weeks, Dale. We're like 9 days away as we record this.
9 days. I'm counting them down. I'm so excited, actually, when I think about it. It's like being a kid, right? And Christmas is just around the fucking corner, right? And everything that you might have dreamt of is possible.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be more than a train set. And there's lots in the build-up. You've been madly busy with all. You've been door knocking, you've been on marches, and, you know, this is all just in the last time since we spoke.
Yeah, in the last week. Yeah. It's crazy.
Tell us about the March for Nature. Because did I see a picture of you with Emma Thompson?
Yeah, I mean, the March for Nature was fantastic. It was Saturday just gone. Chris Packham pulled it together. He got like 350 NGOs together, all kinds of people, you know, Just Stop Oil, National Trust, you know, all kinds of unlikely bedfellows united for this big March for Nature. And yeah, I was holding the banner next to Emma Thompson on one side. Chris was on the other side of her. And on my left, ironically and funnily, was Caroline Lucas, my good friend. I've got to say, we are friends. And we had a good discussion. I'll tell you why it was funny, though. And that's because I have been door knocking with Labour in the last, 2 weeks, and particularly in Bristol and in Brighton. I've been supporting Labour candidates in different places as well, but those two seats, the Greens have a particular focus on. And it's caused a little bit of a stir, there's no doubt about it. And we both found ourselves standing next to each other holding this banner with a sea of press in front of us taking photos and doing interviews. And it's so funny. She said to me, "This is not good for me."
You didn't have a fight, though. That's the good thing.
Not at all. No, but we talked about the issues. I'm just like a bit of a villain to some Green Party members at the moment. Yeah. And I kind of understand it and I kind of don't. You know, I mean, my point is the outcome of the election is not foregone. We can't assume that Labour will win or with a big enough majority to make the really big changes that we need. And the idea, which the Green Party talk up, that one or two Green MPs will help hold Labour to account is just for the birds. That's not going to happen. And I just think we can't afford to take any chances. And every Labour MP counts. And if we lose even just one or two, it could make a big difference. We don't know. The Tories are busy talking down turnout, telling Labour voters, in effect, you don't need to bother. It's a done deal. Telling Tory voters, oh, look out, they're going to get a blank check. Yeah. You need to turn out, that kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? I'm so anxious. It's the biggest opportunity of our lifetimes, this election. Everything's come together. We can have a Green government and we can change everything. And that's why I've been campaigning for Labour everywhere.
How does that go? Just tell us about what that's like when you literally knock on a door.
Yeah, it's brilliant. The format has been kind of turn up. We have one of these ad vans driving around, electric ad van for Brighton. That was great. And on it says, vote Labour for a Green government. We do some photos and then we go knock on doors. And that part's just brilliant. Just meeting people and hearing what they have to say. Really fabulous. I've loved it.
Did anyone say, are you the bloke from the Zero Carbon Easter podcast?
No, sadly not. But while I was still on the street, this guy comes walking past. He looked twice at me and then he said, are you an author? And I was a bit taken aback. I was like,
I thought he was going to say an orphan.
Yeah. I was taken aback because people don't normally say that. And I was like, actually, I am. He said, I've read your book. It's brilliant. And then walked off again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
There you go. That's exactly how you want a fan base, to be very succinct, very straight to the point, and then a nice polite nod and off you go.
And the march, oh my word, so many people came up to me at the march and I gave a speech, which I'm not used to doing on a platform in front of a crowd and stuff, but I really enjoyed it. And I just talked to them about the cow in the room. I said, look, we're all here because we love nature, right? But there's a blind spot that activists, people that are for nature and climate action, they have a blind spot. They carry on eating animals, and it's animal agriculture that's driving the climate crisis and the decline of nature in our country. And I expected it to go down badly, but the crowd loved it, and it was really quite moving.
It's a really good point, because you meet a lot of people, very well-intentioned people, who will be on a march, but they haven't crossed that particular Rubicon yet. Yeah. And I thought it was great you called it the cow in the room.
Yeah.
It is a blind spot, isn't it? If you are consistent with your environmental arguments, at some point you have to arrive at that cow in the room.
You've got to. That's right. It's a big psychological disconnect, and I've seen it for decades. Going all the way back to COP4, I think it was. I wrote about it in my book, right? I infiltrated, along with Greenpeace, we infiltrated a meeting of these, what they call themselves, they're like Climate Coalition or something. It's one of these groups that have a name that belies their true intentions. It was oil companies and car companies getting together in the morning of every day of COP and carving out the agenda and splitting up to disrupt all of the possible constructive progress that people might make. It was incredible. They had their own secretariat and everything. And we infiltrated this thing. We put on suits and ties and pretended to be part of the gang. It's so funny. But in the evening, and this is the point I'm coming to, I'm ordering a pizza without cheese and they're ordering fucking great big steaks.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
guys. It doesn't work, does it? It doesn't work. But I think it still comes from a well-intentioned place. I don't think it obliterates everything else. I think the word blind spot is exactly it. And it's only when people like yourself talk about it and raise it, people go, oh, didn't realize that.
Yeah. I think if people know and do it, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But if you don't know, you just need somebody to tell you. And, I think that's the root of most of the change we need to bring. We just need to tell people what's wrong with some of the stuff that we all just do out of instinct almost.
Yeah, like going to a betting shop to place a bet on when the election is, even though you actually work very closely to the Prime Minister and would possibly have had that information before anybody else. I mean, that kind of thing.
I love your pivots, your links, your whatever you call them. That's brilliant. That kind of thing.
Let's talk about that, Del. I mean, what the hell is going on there?
It was stunning, wasn't it? It was like some senior person in the election campaign, then a couple of Tory candidates, and then it was the chief data officer. It was a close protection copper who also joined in. He obviously overheard the conversation. Today, just like half an hour ago in the news, the Met have announced there's another 5 coppers in the dock for this. And oh my word, what a look. I mean, I talked about this on Sky. We're going to talk about that in a minute on Sunday. I think it's the perfect metaphor for 14 years of Tory rule, corruption and self-interest. These guys have just no idea. And it's the perfect swan song as well to happen 2 weeks out from an election. And Rishi Sunak is not dealing with it. He just says, I can't talk about it as there's an investigation in progress. Do you know what I mean?
I don't doubt, and everybody seems to have said this, that, Rishi Sunak's probably, if you lived next door to you, he'd put your bins out on the right day, he'd probably cut your grass and make you a cup of tea. But he's a shit politician. And he's surrounded himself, apparently his most closest confidant is his mate from school. Now, this is no good. Even yesterday, so Keir and Rishi were in this building yesterday to do the debate, and they did it for The Sun and beyond. And he was asked about disowning the candidates that have been accused of this.
Which he should have done, right?
Yeah, and he has done now. But last night he hadn't.
Oh, really? He has done it?
This afternoon he has. So last night he literally was still going, well, we must let the investigation run its course. Yep. It's like, no, mate. You can't do that. And
that's a week, right? That's a week of not doing that.
And so today, somebody finally said, here, Prime Minister, I think you might need to disown the candidates. But you think?
Such a
really? Wow.
That's brilliant. I heard that The Sun really grilled him as well. Actually, our mate Harry from The Sun was quite kind of robust with him.
Apparently, Harry tore him a new one, was the phrase.
I think it might be the phrase. And also, I've seen this myself. He's looking quite spiky. He doesn't like some of the questions he's getting from people, from the audience. It's kind of pissing him off. He's like a wounded bear. Sooner it's all over for him, I think, the better. And for us, obviously.
Well, it's interesting because we then did an interview with Keir Starmer afterwards, just for Talk Radio, where he was talking about knife crime and various other things. And we had a commentator on from the Mail on Sunday today, not exactly a newspaper you would align with Labour. And she said, rarely seen a politician look so relaxed and confident about what he was saying. And that's the key thing, isn't it?
That's the difference.
You've got to have that sense that they believe what they say and feel confident in what they say. Otherwise, nobody else will.
Well, that's true. Any kind of public speaking is like that. I think Keir's grown into this campaign, actually. I saw the first debate between the two, and I thought there were moments where he didn't look so confident. But I think he's grown into it. He does look super confident now. And I guess that happens, right? Once you've been around the questions a few times and the issues and stuff, you got it covered.
Indeed. Let's talk about another election that was massive as well. Brexit. See, why are we bringing this up? Because Brexit is 8.
Yeah, incredible. And I didn't know that, but I mean, this is for our right wing nut section, really. In the chair this week, we've got Liam Fox, and I...
In the chair. Is that one we can plug in?
That would be good. So I bumped into him on Sky Politics Hub on Sunday night with Sophie Ridge, except she wasn't there, which is amusing. And Liam Fox comes in, and he just does this incredible job of denying everything. He's like, oh, yeah, the gambling scandal. It doesn't matter. It doesn't reflect on the government. There was a copper that did it too, so it's not all about politicians. You think, fuck's sake, Liam, get a grip. And then he's like, Brexit, yeah, it's been brilliant. I've never heard anybody say that. And then Rwanda, yeah, Rwanda's great. It's all, and it was just like stunning. So, he deserves to be in the chair this week for that. But Brexit is he was saying, we're the fourth biggest exporter in the world now because of Brexit. And Ed Conway, I think it is from the show, he'd actually crunched the data on this claim because the Tories had made it earlier. And he says, look, if you look at a 10-year average, fourth is our average position. Ain't new. It's just come up from last year. So that's one thing. And then he said, actually, we're only there now because of the buying and selling of gold. Apparently, we're a big importer, exporter of gold. We don't make it here. We just buy and sell it. And then he showed our position with gold stripped out, and we're like 6th or 7th or something like that.
So it's a different story.
Hogwash.
Yeah, but Liam wouldn't see that.
No, he wouldn't see that. No.
Liam would just go, look, see, it's brilliant.
He just repeats what he's told.
We're 6th, but somebody else is 7th. That's great. You were saying 4th a second ago, you dimwit.
Oh, it was incredible. It really was, especially the scandal, the betting scandal one, to try and deny that it had impact.
Nobody, I've listened to some of the most right-wing Tories who've just gone, yep, it's a crock of shit, mate, and this is horrendous. Yeah. And, that's the only answer, right?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely. And dealt with badly, because that made it worse.
Yeah.
Right, just made it worse.
Yeah, how you deal with it becomes as bad as the initial allegation.
And then when you eventually deal with it in the right way, like he has done today or yesterday, it just emphasizes the point that you dealt with it badly before.
Indeed.
I mean, there's no winning here.
Chris on X says, Dale, where can I find you at Glasgow this weekend? Yeah, you're off to Glastonbury tomorrow as we record this, and you're going to be there for the whole weekend. Are you warm up for Coldplay? Is that what's happening, Dale? What's the score here?
Yeah, I've been having a laugh saying I'm playing at Glastonbury this year. I'm not headlining. This just amuses me to say that. I'm in the Greenfield. I think it's Speakers Corner, Speakers Forum, something like that. And I'm doing 2 gigs, starting at 2:00, running till 4:00. And I think I've got a gig at Shangri-La as well on the Friday night. I'm not really sure. So 2 or 3 gigs. I'll also be at the Just Vote booth. We've got one there with a team of people, just encouraging people to get out and vote. It's too late now to register, of course, but it's not too late to turn up with your ID and actually vote. We're doing some media from there, some photos and stuff like that. So I'll be in them places, and otherwise, just bimbling around.
Indeed. Question from Clemmy. Where do you stand? It's just cornflower, or it's an attack on a special monument? This is reference, of course, Just Stop Oil, who went a bit nuts over Stonehenge.
That happened in the last week as well, didn't it? That's a crazy thing. It's just cornflower. That's where I stand. And what we've been doing is posting out on social media. But here's a funny thing, right? Rishi Sunak, he puts out a statement and he says it's a terrible act of vandalism to a national monument. They should be ashamed and stuff like that. They need to be condemned. And he says a certain Labour Party donor should condemn them. Right? He doesn't name me, but he means me. And all the media say, oh, he means Dale Vince. Yeah. But he just hadn't said it. So I put out a social post. I said, since you've asked me, Rishi, to personally comment, I will. Here it is. I don't support what they've done is what I think I said. But actually, the worst vandalism that's happening to the Stones, and a lot of people don't know this, is a government proposed tunnel to go underneath the site, wherein there'll be irreversible harm done, according to the UN, according to government planning inspectors who were overruled by this government, with the loss of 500,000 artifacts in the process of just turning the A303 into a tunnel for 3 kilometres. I mean, what the
Will that get reversed, do you think, under Labour?
I hope so. Yeah, do hope so, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't make any sense.
No, it'll still be a shit road even when it's built, whether it's a tunnel or on top.
So, and it doesn't impact on the view of the Stones, the road. You know what I mean? It's not a harmful thing. It used to be right next door. I don't know if you remember that, but the road was literally right next door to the Stones. When I was a hippie, we used to pull up on the verge opposite the Stones and run in.
And howl at the moon.
Yeah, howl at the cops.
Come back. Here's what 2/3, just a brief word on this, Dale. 2/3 of GB green energy projects fail to clear planning. Now, this is likely to all change in a week or so, but what's your response to that one?
Yeah, exactly that, really. I mean, this is the history. It's been so incredibly difficult. If you go back to the start of this century, we had a 90% success rate for wind projects. It was the best in the industry. It was because we were very careful of what we chose and stuff like that. But to find that 60% now are turned down is incredible. But as you say, it's all about to change. So this is a little piece of history.
Here's a story about Elon Musk, your arch nemesis, who's had trouble with his satellites.
Yeah, I mean, we knew, right? We always knew he was one of those supervillains, didn't we, from a James Bond film or something like that. Turns out his Starlink satellites, I mean, I think he's got 6,000 of them orbiting the world now to beam the internet everywhere. It turns out when their life expired, they crash and burn through the atmosphere and they harm the ozone layer. They have a lovely term for it. They call it deorbiting, but it's not deorbiting, it's crashing and burning through the atmosphere. All of those precious materials in the satellite is one thing, but then they're turned to what is it? Aluminium oxide gas is the culprit in this case that's depleting the ozone layer. So, Musk is an eco-villain as well as being a tosser.
And he's doing it in space. Just because you're doing it in space, mate, you can't the place over and think nobody can see me here. This is essentially just the equivalent of dropping 17 billion trillion gallons of oil in the English Channel.
Some of these billionaires out there, racing to space with their enormous rockets and shit like that, they're harming the world that we all live in, and there's no control of them.
And a final question from Tim, who says, you mentioned a report about how much money pig lover David Cameron has cost us.
Harsh, but
where do I find it?
It's online. Sorry for the snort. That wasn't intentional.
I thought it was a pig.
It's online. Green Britain Foundation's got a website. It's on there. And I've got a website, as it happens, dalevince.com, and it's on there as well. And I think later on we'll get it on Ecotricities as well.
There it is. Dale, we're going to speak in a week. That'll be our last one next week before the election. So
on Christmas Eve, right?
Christmas Eve. Yes, that's right. Yes, Dale thinks it's Christmas Eve.
Come on. And I hate Christmas, but not this one, not this version of Christmas.
Don't forget, of course, to follow this podcast so that you get each episode automatically, and follow Dale on social media, facebook.com/DaleVince, twitter.com/DaleVince, and on TikTok too.
You gotta love it.
Zero carbon
east of